When you think about school safety, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Probably gates, right? Maybe security guards. But behind those physical walls, there's a whole other system at play, a really complex one, made of laws, people, and specific plans. And in this explainer, we're going to pull that system apart, piece by piece, to see how it's really supposed to work.
So, to get us started, just think about this. A teacher's scrolling through Instagram and likes a student's vacation photo. Seems harmless, right? A friendly gesture? Or could that one little click be stepping onto a legal tightrope? This one question shows you just how high the stakes are and how blurry the lines have become.
All right, before we dive into specific rules or who's on what committee, we have to start at the very beginning. We need to understand the one core legal idea that everything else is built on. This is the absolute foundation of a school's duty to keep kids safe. And that foundation has this kind of formal Latin name, loca parentis. It literally means in the place of a parent. Now, under the family code, this isn't just a nice sentiment, it's a legal doctrine. The moment you enroll your child, the school legally takes on what's called special parental authority. This is a legally binding responsibility for that child's safety and well-being. Okay, so to make sense of this whole system, we're going to look at it through three different lenses. First, we'll look at the law. These are the rules of the game. Then we'll look at governance, the people whose job it is to enforce those rules. And finally, risk management, which is basically the playbook schools use to stop bad things from happening in the first place. Let's start with that first lens, the law. And for teachers and school staff, this is way more than just a handbook. It's more like a legal minefield they have to navigate really, really carefully every single day to protect both their students and themselves. So what does child abuse actually mean in the eyes of the law? Well, under Republic Act 7610, it's way broader than most of us think. Of course, it covers physical abuse, but it also includes psychological abuse, like humiliating a student in front of the class, and even neglect, like a school knowing about bullying and just doing nothing. And this quote from the law itself is incredibly powerful. It says any act that debases, degrades, or demeans the intrinsic worth and dignity of a child is a crime. Just think about that. It means an attack on a child's dignity is legally just as serious as a physical attack. So let's make that real. You know that old school punishment of making a noisy kid wear a sign that says, "I am noisy"? Well, today, that's not discipline. Under this law, that act of public humiliation is actually considered a criminal offense because it demeans that child's dignity. And of course, the laws keep evolving. The Anti-Bullying Act brought in a game-changing idea. You can be held liable for inaction. A teacher can get in trouble for not doing something about bullying. And then you have the Safe Spaces Act, which brings all this protection into the 21st century, making things like online harassment a crime. Okay, so that's the law. But laws are just words on a page until people put them into action. So let's move to our second lens, governance. Who actually makes up the safety engine inside a school? Well, the core of that engine is the Child Protection Committee, or the CPC. Now, let's be super clear. This is not some optional club or a group of volunteers. It's mandated by law. Every single school has to have one. This is their official, internal safety team. And the way this committee is built is really smart. It's a mix of people. You've got the school head, the guidance counselor, a teacher, a parent, and even a student representative. And that's on purpose. It's designed so that no single group has all the power, which helps keep the process fair and transparent. Now, that committee we just talked about, they're facing a challenge that didn't even exist a generation ago. Social media. This is that digital tightrope where professional lines can get fuzzy in a heartbeat. So to deal with this, the Department of Education issued a very clear and, for a lot of people, a very surprising rule. This order flat out tells teachers to avoid interacting with students on social media outside of school activities. No following, no friending, no private messaging unless you're related. So you're probably asking, why? Why such a hard line? It can feel a little extreme, right? Well, there's a very clear and protective strategy behind this rule. It really comes down to three things. Number one, it shuts down the main private channel that predators use for grooming. Number two, it helps get rid of potential bias in the classroom. And number three, and this is so important, it actually protects teachers from false accusations, where a totally innocent message could be twisted and used against them. You know, that strict social media rule is a perfect example of our third and final lens, risk management. The best safety systems don't just react to problems. They're all about being proactive, about designing a whole environment where it's just harder for bad things to happen at all.
So here's what that looks like in the real world. A school does a risk audit. They identify a hazard, say a poorly lit stairwell, and they label the risk as high. So what's the plan? They implement a fix, like installing CCTV or doing more patrols. It's a really simple but powerful loop. Find the weak spot, then make it stronger. But what happens when prevention doesn't work? When an incident actually happens? That's when the system is truly tested. And that's when the rules of accountability kick in and the consequences get very real. Okay, get this. A single act can launch two totally separate cases at the same time. You have the criminal case that's in a court of law, needs proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and could lead to jail time. And then you have an administrative case, which is handled internally by DepEd, only needs substantial evidence, and can get a teacher fired.
And here is the part that so many people miss. Because the standard of proof is lower in the administrative case, a teacher can be found not guilty in court, but still be found liable by DepEd and lose their job. Being cleared in one does not automatically clear you in the other.
So when you put all these pieces together, the laws, the committees, the proactive risk planning, it becomes incredibly clear. A safe school is not an accident. It doesn't just happen. It's a system designed and built on purpose.
Which leaves us with one last big question to think about. When you look at the schools in your own community, is their child protection system a real, living, breathing thing that's put into practice every day? Or is it just a policy, sitting in a binder on a shelf, waiting for a crisis to happen? The answer to that question, well, that makes all the difference in the world.